Hello, my name is Ethan, and I am 17 years old. Recently, a new zoo opened in the city, Wild Wonders, and my friends and I decided to visit it on a weekday when the tickets were cheaper and the place would be quieter to see what it was like. I've always enjoyed going out and spending days with my friends, and this seemed like a great opportunity to do something different. On that sunny morning, Madison, Chloe, Ryan, Lucas and I were excited to see the animals, explore the place, and maybe even meet some interesting girls. We arrived at Wild Wonders, and as expected, the place was much emptier than on weekends. The huge ornate gates welcomed us with a large colourful sign announcing the day's attractions. The tranquil air and the unoccupied space made the zoo seem even larger. As soon as we entered, I noticed that the staff seemed strangely uniformed and their smiles were a bit too stiff, but I thought it was just part of the marketing effort to look impeccable. We decided to start our exploration in the big cat area. The roar of a lion in the distance heightened our excitement as we advanced through the zoo, eager to see the exhibits. As we explored the zoo, we began to notice some peculiarities that didn't make sense. There were few visitors besides us, which was strange even for a weekday. Additionally, many enclosures were empty, with no signs of animal life. The few animals we did see seemed agitated, pacing back and forth restlessly. The staff, with their forced smiles and mechanical movements, did not help ease the strange feeling. While walking, we decided to stop in front of the big cat enclosure, where a majestic lion rested in the shade of a tree. Madison commented on how the lion's eyes looked incredibly human, almost as if it were watching us with an unsettling intelligence. We laughed at the idea, thinking she was exaggerating, but the comment stayed in my mind. Further along, we noticed that one of the enclosures that should have housed a family of tigers was completely empty, except for some strange marks on the ground, as if something had been dragged. As we continued our exploration, we reached the reptile area. The place was dark and damp, with illuminated tanks displaying snakes and lizards of various species. While we observed a huge coiled python, Lucas noticed something strange. "Guys, did you see that?" he asked, pointing to the tank. In the glass reflection, there appeared to be a human face, distorted and distressed, as if trapped there. Ryan took a step back, visibly shaken. "This can't be real," he said, trying to laugh to hide his nervousness. We decided to move on, but a feeling of discomfort was beginning to take hold of us. Leaving the reptile area, we decided to take a break in the food court, which was practically deserted. While eating, we noticed that the few remaining visitors also seemed uneasy, exchanging suspicious glances with each other. Ethan tried to use his phone to check a message, but there was no signal. "This is strange. There's always good signal here," he commented. We then decided to explore the primate area, but upon arriving there, we found the cages empty. Only a small monkey was present, swinging frantically. Madison approached, and the monkey stopped abruptly, staring straight into her eyes. "This is getting scary," Chloe said, visibly nervous. As we continued our exploration, the feeling of discomfort intensified. We decided to investigate the exotic bird area. The aviary was large and full of vegetation, but contrary to expectations, it was strangely silent. Only a few birds moved, and they seemed to be hiding from something. Suddenly, we heard a muffled scream coming from a nearby building marked restricted access. Lucas, always curious, suggested we check it out. As we approached, we saw a staff member hurriedly entering, quickly closing the door behind him. "Something is very wrong here," Ethan said. We decided to cautiously approach, curiosity now mixed with a growing sense of fear. We approached the door marked restricted access, and carefully, Lucas tried to open it. To our surprise, it was unlocked. We entered a dimly lit and damp corridor with moss-covered walls. The sound of our footsteps echoed, increasing the tension. At the end of the corridor, there was a large glass room where we could see several staff members performing strange activities. In one corner, A table was full of instruments that looked like they came out of a horror movie. In the center of the room, we saw something that chilled us to the bone. A person was being transformed into an animal in a painful and grotesque process. Ryan gasped in horror at the scene, and Chloe held my hand, trembling. Before we could react, one of the staff members spotted us. He shouted something unintelligible, and suddenly, all eyes in the room turned to us. "Run!" I whispered, pulling Chloe by the hand as the others closely followed. We ran down the corridor, the sound of hurried footsteps and shouts echoing behind us. We managed to get out and lock the door behind us, but we knew it would only buy us a little time. We needed to get out of that zoo as quickly as possible. My heart pounded in my chest as we tried to find the nearest exit, but the place, which once seemed large and empty, now felt like an endless maze. We ran desperately, trying to find the exit, but the zoo seemed to have transformed into a maze. Every path we took seemed to lead us back to the starting point. Madison suggested we try the entrance gate, but we quickly realized it was locked and guarded by more staff, with those disturbingly rigid smiles. "We need a plan," said Lucas, panting. Then, Ryan spotted a sign indicating a path to the maintenance area. "Maybe we can find an exit there," he suggested. With no better options, we quickly followed the indicated direction, with the sound of the staff's footsteps getting closer. Panic was starting to take hold of us. We reached the maintenance area, a space filled with equipment and old machines. The place was deserted except for the distant sound of approaching footsteps. Lucas found a ladder leading to a basement and suggested we hide there. We quickly descended the ladder, trying not to make noise. In the basement, we found a series of dark tunnels that seemed to lead to different parts of the zoo. "We need to split up and find an exit," said Ethan, trying to stay calm. Madison and Ryan took one tunnel, while Chloe, Lucas, and I went through another. The air was heavy, and every sound echoed eerily, increasing our anxiety. Every second felt like an eternity as we advanced in the dark, hoping to find an exit from this nightmare. Following the dark tunnel, the atmosphere was very tense. The narrow, damp walls made each step echo. A strong smell of rot filled our nostrils, and everything increased our anxiety. Suddenly, we heard a distant scream, followed by an eerie silence. "That came from Madison and Ryan's tunnel," said Chloe, her eyes wide with fear. We tried to quicken our pace, hoping our friends were okay. Finally, we reached a fork and chose the left path, which seemed slightly more illuminated. In the distance, we saw a faint light that seemed to be an exit. Relief was instantaneous, but as we got closer, we found a locked iron grate. Lucas started to force the grate, while Chloe and I searched for something that could help. That's when we noticed shadows moving in the opposite direction of the tunnel. Our hearts raced as we saw it was the zoo staff, approaching quickly. With no other option, we began to scream for help, hoping someone outside could hear us before it was too late. We exited the tunnel and ran across the open field behind the zoo. We spotted a tall fence in the distance, with a small maintenance door. Running desperately, we reached the door, and luckily, it was only ajar. We pushed the door open and passed through to the other side, finally off the zoo grounds. The relief was instantaneous, but we knew we were not yet safe. We needed to find help. We saw a road in the distance and ran towards it. When we reached the road, we saw a car approaching. Lucas ran into the middle of the road, waving desperately. The car stopped, and the driver, an elderly man, rolled down the window, surprised to see our state. "Please help us. Call the police," I begged. The man quickly told us to get in the car and called the police while driving. The police arrived within minutes, and we told them everything that had happened at the zoo. The man who rescued us confirmed our story and insisted that the officers investigate. We got into the police cars and returned to the zoo, our hearts still racing, hoping our friends were okay. However, when we got there, everything seemed incredibly normal. The staff greeted us with fake smiles, denying any irregularities. The police conducted a quick search but found nothing out of the ordinary. The enclosures were all occupied, and the visitors present seemed to have no idea what was happening. "They were here, I swear," said Chloe, almost in tears. But without concrete evidence, the police couldn't do much. One of them offered us a ride back home, advising us to rest and seek professional help. Thinking we might be in shock, desperate, and not knowing what to do, we accepted the ride. When we got home, the weight of Madison and Ryan's disappearance began to sink in. They hadn't come back, and we had no idea what had happened to them. The following nights were sleepless, filled with nightmares and unanswered questions. The Wild Wonders Zoo continued its activities normally, as if nothing had happened. I couldn't get the rigid smiles of the staff and the intelligent eyes of the animals out of my head. We knew something terrible was still happening there, and that our friends might be suffering a horrible fate.